Welcome everybody to this Rad Pod Breaker. My name is Heidi Sigmund Kuda, and I'm here with my podcast partner, High Fidelity. And we are also here with our very good friend, Martin Sheil. Friends of Rad Pod will recognize Marty. Marty is a retired IRS criminal investigator. He built his career putting away guys with names like Fat Larry. He is our money laundering expert, but he also knows a thing or two about how the Department of Justice works, because, of course, his colleagues in, the government work together to put away guys like, Fat Larry. Anyway, indictment day. We are having an impromptu happy hour. Marty, you and I and Hi-Fi have read the latest Jack Smith indictment. What can you tell our friends?
Heidi, thank you for having me on once again. And all I can say is this is a great day for democracy. And I got to wave the flag here. The great day for the rule of law, great day for justice. And most importantly, Donald Trump, the perpetrator of the January 6th incitement, riots, insurrection, and assault on our democracy, is being held accountable for those actions. And the indictment today is the beginning of the process that'll hopefully result in the long term in Mr. Trump going to prison for a very long time. The counts in the indictment, these obstruction counts, are like maximum sentence of 20 years a pop. So in all likelihood, Mr. Trump will die in jail, and I can't think of a better place. So I'm just thrilled to death. This indictment is written so well. It's bereft of legalese. It's written in simple English that everyone can comprehend. It talks about how Mr. Trump completely disregarded the truth. That's the lead sentence in one of the graphs. Mr. Trump completely disregarded the truth. And then every paragraph after that and before that just pounds away at Mr. Trump's continual lies and false statements. And this is what we knew from the January 6th Congressional Committee. And they did such a wonderful job in graphically presenting all the witnesses and tying everything together, that I didn't know whether an indictment could, really do that as well. So, but this one does, and Mr. Smith should be commended for writing a very simple indictment, and has no other distractions because it has no other named defendants. It talks about co-conspirators, and there's 6 of them, and most of which are attorneys that will be very familiar to anyone who watched the Congressional Committee. And that's typical of Mr. Trump. That's part of his MO. His modus operandi is to try to use attorneys, to abuse the attorney-client privilege, to get attorneys to do his dirty work and then hide behind them and then throw them away like used tissues when he's done with them. And so we're going to see folks like Rudy Giuliani and Clark and Eastman and the rest of that cabal that concocted these schemes across the street from the White House in the Willard Hotel War Room, where they just concocted one scheme after another, which Mr. Smith just lays out so well. He just breaks it down: the Wisconsin scheme, the Georgia scheme, the Michigan, where false electoral slates were being put together, Mr. Trump just kept talking about the basis for this was all these dead voters or false voters, or all lies. And Smith calls a spade a spade. He says, this completely disregarded the truth. And so he's being held accountable. And I'm going to stop there so you can ask me a question and I can take a drink here. But, in case you didn't get it, I just think this is a wonderful indictment. It's wonderfully composed, simply written, easily read, and hopefully even Mr. Trump's base can read and understand this, and that's so important.
So yes, I really did appreciate how beautifully and simply it was written. I did some ugly crying today, as we mentioned earlier, and that was when I got to the part where it talked about how it took about 6 hours for everybody to reconvene at the Capitol, but our democracy stood on that dark day, on that day when Trump said, or it was what he didn't say, how long it took him to actually get in front of a camera and tell his cult to cease and desist. And then also when I got to the very end, and it's just so beautifully written where it talks about the privilege secured to them by the Constitution and laws of the United States. That is the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. I still can't. I can't. I mean, it's it's all very unprecedented. It's something that we waited a long time for. 7 years for many of us, but it's a moment.
And what's great is that besides the classic conspiracy statutes that Mr. Smith used, and we've probably talked about many times, conspiracy to defraud the government by trying to steal an election, conspiracy to obstruct Congress from certifying the results of the election. But then he threw in a kind of a curveball, which I didn't understand at first, but as I look at it, I really, really relish and appreciate the conspiracy basically to steal our votes. He's basically saying that Mr. Trump was depriving us of our right to vote when he tried to come up with these fake electors and these fake votes. By doing so, he's stealing the votes of everyone who voted for Joe Biden. And we have the right to vote, and it's a sacred part of our democracy, and Mr. Smith is safeguarding that right and highlighting the attempt Mr. Trump did in terms of trying to steal those votes and make legitimate votes not count. And I think that's just a wonderful thing, instead of just saying conspiracy to obstruct, conspiracy to defraud. No, conspiracy to steal your vote is what he's saying. And it goes to the simplicity and the elegance of the simplicity of the way it's written, and where he continually refers to, uses the phrase knowingly. Mr. Trump knowingly did this. He lied here. He disregarded the truth there, and one scheme after another, just breaks it down, and he's got the evidence. And I think something that all your viewers are going to want to know, and it's question 1 or 1A in my mind, is will Mr. Smith be able to bring this indictment to court, to a trial, anytime soon? Particularly, will it be done prior to the November 2024 election, so that all the voters out there know the full facts of this case, that Mr. Trump does have the right and the presumption of innocence going into this court. And we'd like to have this trial finished so that conviction, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Mr. Trump did what has been alleged in this indictment, that all the voters know it before the election. And so then, whatever they decide, well, that's on them at that point. But we know that Mr. Trump's going to try to delay, and I'm heartened by a couple of things. One, Mr. Smith seems hyper competent, and he really seems to have his stuff together. And he wrote this indictment simply and elegantly and efficiently, and leaving out other defendants and co-conspirators. Great. Number two, the judge that's been selected to hear this trial is notorious in Washington, D.C. for how tough she is. Tanya is her first name. I haven't gotten the spelling of her last name, so is LNU for now. But, that'll be all over the media. But she runs a tough court. She has given out the biggest sentences to the rioters and the insurrectionists, and all the judges have had their hands full with trials in the past year. So she's got a track record, and she brooks no dissent. She's got a a record of, she headed up the defendant legal rights for defendants and impoverished defendants, et cetera. So she knows the prosecution side, she knows the defense side, she knows both sides really well. And the other thing that makes me really super happy is, upon conviction, of course, Mr. Trump is going to appeal, that he always does. But the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. is the best appellate court in the land by far. Second's not close. And why do you say that, Marty? Well, let me tell you. The matter is that before Trump, we look at history, we got to say before Trump and after Trump. But before Trump, the appellate court in Washington, D.C. was considered the launching ground, the stepping stone to the Supreme Court, to SCOTUS, because the very best judges are selected to be on the appellate court in Washington, D.C. They are the finest lawyers anywhere, and so they're the best of the best. So any appeals that go there, if the appellate court confirms the conviction or affirm, I should say affirm, gotta be legal here, then Trump can appeal to SCOTUS, to the Supreme Court, which of course would be concerning given that he has appointed several of them. But the SCOTUS must address the appeal the way the appellate court writes their opinion. So they are going to write a very, very elegant, tight legal opinion affirming the conviction. So it'll be very difficult for SCOTUS to overturn, and it'll almost have to be transparent, fraudulent if SCOTUS tries to overturn this conviction. So I'm looking long term. You got to think big picture, long term when you think of Trump and his legal shenanigans and all his political and tactical legal maneuvers. But I'm feeling very good about this indictment, about the process. And the other thing I'm going to say, I think Mr. Smith has really learned already a lot from the so-called documents indictment and process, that what he did in that case was phenomenal in terms of he's already dumped all the evidence they have. It's called discovery. You gotta show your hand. You gotta show your cards when you go to court. And he's already provided all copies of all the evidence the government has to the Trump legal team, which has to be like thousands of documents, which will take a while for them to work through. There won't be as much evidence in the J6 indictment. It's going to be mostly, text messages and telephone calls and transcripts, that type of thing, grand jury transcripts. And that won't take long at all to provide to the Trump team. So, but that's important that Trump gets that evidence, gets discovery as soon as possible, because otherwise, they'll say, well, we don't have time to review the evidence, if it's just given like a month or so before the trial date. One thing that Smith made very clear today in his press conference was Speedy Trial Act. He's going to make an attempt to abide by the Speedy Trial Act, which is, usually the trial has got to be set 70 days from the time of indictment. So that's a little over 2 months. So now the other really good information that I got today, I don't know if you all are aware, but the district attorney in Manhattan, who's got the hush money case, what's his name, Abram? He has already let everyone know that he's got a trial slated for March on the hush money case. He said he is more than open. He's a team player. He's more than open to moving his trial to a later date to open up, for anyone else who have another.
Nice.
So
nice.
So I think that's great. And now the last thing would be Fani Willis, the Fulton County DA in Georgia. She's got what's alleged to be purported to be a RICO prosecution coming down the pike. And that pike is coming real soon. It could be this week, more likely next week. And she said, I saw her on cable the other day. She said Fani Willis has not been in communication with Jack Smith as yet. That is as of last weekend. But you got to think they're going to have to communicate at some point here and soon, because they're going to have a lot of the same witnesses and possibly some of the same testimony and some of the same evidence. So they're going to have to, talk, and that can only be good. Hopefully they'll work each other's schedules out, and hopefully Mr. Trump will be in a box between the RICO indictment in Georgia and the insurrection indictment here, conspiracy in Washington. And then, of course, he's got the documents case, which is tight.
Yes.
Heck, that is so tight.
Yes.
Oh, I told you that that Bedminster document, the Iran war plans would come into play. Now,
yes,
I thought
you did.
apparently, I thought they would indict it in New Jersey, but apparently they found that document had been retained in Mar-a-Lago, so that gives them a basis for, even though it became famous by him waving it around in New Jersey, it was in fact retained in Florida, so that is now the count 32 of the docs case. So that is so important, that particular count, because it demonstrates Mr. Trump's knowledge of that he couldn't declassify it because he wasn't the president anymore, and he could have if he was the president, but he couldn't now. But it also, in my mind, it provides motive. Mr. Trump standing up in his country club in front of folks who don't have security clearance, biographers of Mark Meadows, and waving this document around saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. That's dissemination of classified documents. When you say, look at this, look at this. All right, that's an important element of the crime. But it also shows that Trump is showing off. He wants people to see that he still has a top secret document in his hand, and he's trying to win an argument that he had with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, about whether or not who was the first to talk about starting a war in Iran. Yeah. So it answers the question that I think a lot of folks have. I know I do, and possibly what the jurors have in their mind is, why did he do this? Why did he retain all these documents? Why, and because he wants to show off. He wants to stroke his ego, saying, "Look, I have this, top secret document, and it's about Iran. We were thinking about going to war in Iran, and I had this disagreement with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I'm right. You see this?
Yeah.
See what it says? See that makes me right. Well, that's motive. He wants to stroke his ego. He wants to show off, and that is motive. And I think that really kind of like completes the circle. And really ties it in a ribbon, and because you always want to show means, motive, and circumstantial evidence that shows that what's in his mind. And when he waves that,
did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
Marty, you're frozen. You're frozen. There he is. Come back. Okay. So I know Hi-Fi has a question. I have a slew of questions. Hi-Fi, you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So the first one is a list of names. So because co-conspirator 1, Giuliani.
Yes.
Co-conspirator 2, Eastman.
Yes.
Co-conspirator 3,
Clark.
No, I think 3 was Powell because it was.
Oh yeah,
okay.
That's correct.
Powell.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, 4 was Clark.
Right.
Oh, or what we call him, underwear, Mr. Underwear.
Yeah. Mr. Drawers.
Yes.
5 was probably Kenny Chesebro.
Right.
And then 6, I'm kind of up in the air. I've heard 3 names. I've heard Navarro, but he wasn't a consultant. I've heard Ivan Raiklan, but I don't think it was him. And I've also heard the name Mike Roman. So those are the 3 I'm throwing out there for number 6. I don't know which one for sure.
Well, so what I want to say is Marty mentioned this earlier. Even if you think you're one of those co-conspirators, you may want to run and try to cut your deal now. Am I right?
Oh yeah, this is classic. First one through the door gets the best deal, and if they don't go through the door, then they'll get personally indicted.
Yeah.
And the question will be, will Jack Smith do superseding indictments, individual superseding indictments, or will he put them all together? I think that he'll do individual superseding indictments because he's trying to race against the clock and trying to maintain the focus on Trump, the main defendant, and bring him to justice before the election. Not only just before the election, before the campaign really heats up, they go to conventions and primaries and all that other stuff. So, he can wait. The statute of limits is good for a while. He can wait to bring the other indictments against the attorneys. But the attorneys, they're in a world of hurt. And I'm if they plead to a felony, that's a basis for being disbarred. So I don't know that they're going to plead. Now, are there some misdemeanors out there that Smith can find to work a deal with these attorneys so that they'll cooperate? I think he'll probably be scouring the Department of Justice and the government code, and he'll probably find a misprison of a felony. That's like a classic statute that's used when in these types of circumstances. So look up in the dictionary when you get a chance. You got homework. Misprison of a felony. Basically saying they knew that a crime was being committed, and I think you're going to see that used a lot. So that's my prediction here. So we'll see.
So two things, in case a member of the cult is watching, I think it's really important that when I actually saw the image of Clark on the lawn in his underwear, I think of all the images we've seen in the last 7 years, to me, that was the most mob-like image. And you explained to me why they do that, but I never quite forgot it. His home was being raided. And I think it's very important to note that Trump's personal lawyers have all been disbarred. So I think that when we kind of look at cult dynamics, at some point, people may want to look at reality. And I know that's kind of difficult when you're constantly being fed an unreality. But I would say, to me, that image was very, very important. So one thing I want to bring up with you, Marty, is that we talked earlier. I'm writing an American Monster series. Among the people I profiled was Roy Cohn, who was the attorney for the mob families in New York, as well as Fred Trump and Donald Trump. And he always viewed indictments as opportunities to get in front of a camera and try to control the narrative away from the facts of criminality and toward victimhood, toward being able to create a vendetta or manufacture a vendetta that the prosecutor might have. I watched Trump use that playbook all the time, and I was incredibly disappointed by the media today because they immediately quoted verbatim Trump's response using a term about Biden's family, which I'm not going to repeat because it is propaganda and it's inaccurate. And I would like you to help us armor up mentally and emotionally for all the bullshittery that is going to come our way.
Right. Well, Trump is, in his mind, the best defense is offense, and he's trying to go on offense. He realizes that, the gig is just about up. And what he's trying to do is he's playing to his base. He's trying to, play the victim. He's being persecuted, not prosecuted. And it's classic. We've heard this before, and he's going to raise funds by doing this. But, he's going to try to get his base and Congress to get all hyped up, ginned up to try to impeach, his Mr. Biden, the guy who's trying to beat him, that he's running for president against. So this is what Trump does, and you know, he uses attorneys and as a shield to do his dirty work. He's done this forever since Roy Cohn, that you've written so eloquently about. He did it with Mike Cohen. He's done it with Manafort. He's done it with a bunch, and he tried to get all of his attorney generals to do the same thing, weaponize them to go
Right.
after his opponents, and and so that's sweet justice here that so many attorneys are co-conspirators, and they're the ones that concocted so many of these conspiracies in the individual states, putting together phony electors, trying to discount legitimate votes, and claiming dead people voted and all this other stuff. This is classic Trump. This is like a mob guy. He's projecting fascism. He claims that Biden's a fascist, that the Biden runs a crime family, and he's just projecting his own inadequacies to Biden and to any other prospective opponent, and he's done it for so long. It wore thin with me a long time ago, and I'm hoping that the more publicity that this indictment gins up, the more hopefully, or the less support Mr. Trump gets. Hopefully, some of that base will start to fritter away. But more significantly, his political donors are going to, they got their fingers up in the wind. Which way is the wind blowing? And it doesn't look good that they're going to get their boy back in the White House to do their work for them. So they're going to be reluctant to gin up millions of dollars, dark money through these super PACs that will support Mr. Trump. And Trump, I'm a follow the money guy. And there are reports in the Wall Street Journal and the Times today that Trump has already spent more money than he's collected. So he's already in hock. And a lot of that probably is because so much of his money is going to attorneys, which surprise. But how what's he going to do? I mean, are those super donors? Are they going to fall for the baloney, the propaganda that Trump's PR folks are going to put out? Maybe some of them will, but the big boys, the Koch brothers, Ron Lauder, all these folks, Mercer, they're going to look for someone else that will do them right, that they'll get a quo for their quid, literally. So, and Trump, I don't see Trump making it to the White House now. I mean, he's unless, of course, some major or many minor miracles occur, he is going to be convicted. The question is timing. Will the conviction, all his appeals take place prior to the election, or will he in fact be in prison? And because once he goes to prison, he's not coming out. I mean, he's going to get, this judge will sentence him to, basically a lifetime. And so he will be done. One of the big concerns I have is the stirring up, the propaganda, as you point out. Will Trump start trying to get his base to, is he going to try to do a repetition in the run up to January 6th? Will he try to stir them up with tweets like, come to Washington, it'll be crazy, it'll be wild, you got to fight like hell for what you believe in, and et cetera, et cetera. Will he do that? And will the government be prepared better this time? And hopefully Fonnie Willis has put out a nice guideline for everybody. I don't know if you see the ramparts down there in Fort County, the barricades in the streets, and they're ready for anything down there. Well, Washington, the marshals, the Capitol Police, they were pretty much embarrassed by January 6th. That, they're going to have to pull out all the stops, and they're motivated too. And I don't know if you saw Jack Smith's press conference, but he led with how courageous and honorable those folks were in fighting for not just democracy and not just the Congress ladies, but for everyone. That they are the heroes, and this is one of the main reasons why Mr. Smith is bringing this indictment is because of those cops and troopers and guards and you know, how valiantly and honorably they fought to defend our government. And so, you know that they'll be ready the next time. But let's see how Trump, what he does. What is he going to try to go for insurrection number 2, or is he going to just try to play out the clock and delay? Who knows? You know, but we'll see. Today's a happy day. I'm just so happy. Saved, accountability, justice, the rule of law. You know, God bless America.
I don't think that we can do any better than that. Ladies and gentlemen,
Jeff Clark is drawers.
Fascist court with their pants down.
So for
the emperor has no clothes.
For anybody just tuning in, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is accused of perpetrating 3 criminal conspiracies: conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, deceit; conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding; conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's votes counted. Very important to know, as Marty said, Donald Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators to corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, the certification of the electoral votes, your votes. This is our country. This is a very good day. Thank you, Martin Sheil, for being here with us today. Thank you, High Five, for hustling to put this together. And I think we should probably let Jack Smith say a few words.
As soon as I find that file, here we go. Oh, and I may have edited the end just a little bit, but you'll figure that out.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots, and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you. And our investigation of other individuals continues. And our investigation of other individuals continues. And our investigation of other individuals continues. And our investigation of other individuals continues.
Okay.